can do in 10 minutes. As I was saying, there's a lot more that I can do in 10 minutes, so it'll be a very quick whistle-stop tour. So I want to look at internationalization, as the title suggests, from a linguistic perspective. And I give credit to my colleagues. I don't think they're here. Rui He Paul Smith. We did this as a team, of course. And what we wanted to do was basically look into, we have a large number of Chinese students on our program. I think it's close to 100% Chinese in one of the programs. And over the years, we've noticed certain features in their academic writing in terms of vocabulary, grammar, even style, and to even include their emails to teachers that happen so often, so predictably. We're at the point now we say, well, even if for the sake of argument, someone says, well, this is an error, at what point does an error become an innovation? No linguist can ever say. It's always lost to time. But it is predictable, it is systematic. So to give some backdrop, world Englishes, inner circle would be native speakers, outer circle, countries which have a history of colonization, and with that English, like Indian English, Pakistani English. And China English, as the term is used, would be the expanding circle. So China, Brazil, Russia, where English is widely used as a foreign language, not as a second language. This model has been criticized, done by the Indian linguist Katru, but that's another time, but it's still very influential. So what is Chinglish? Chinglish largely seen as translation errors from a Chinese language, probably Mandarin, into English. Most commonly seen on public signage, but it can be seen on menus in China, even T-shirts. So that's public sign, carefully slide. I think it's important to mention that a lot of the times the translations are not ungrammatical. It's the semantics which are a little bit confusing. Carefully slide is grammatical, but the meaning is not what we would expect. We, and who is we, native speakers of English, which of course is not a monolith, probably would be watch your step. Then Chinese English is a term used, which, unlike Chinglish, is talking about errors and interference from Chinese, but more often seen or heard in the spoken context, not just public signs. It's something we might hear in Chinese people when they're speaking English, like I very like this, which is a direct translation from the Chinese, 我很喜欢, I very like. Although Sven Albrecht uses the term Chinese English the way most of linguists, myself included, use the term China English. Outside of that, though, China English, like Chinglish, is pretty much unanimously agreed to be a form of English used by Chinese people. It is based on standard native speaker English, probably standard British English. And over time, it has developed to the point it is now predictable. It is systematic. And when we're at that stage, then it's no good saying, well, this is not correct because it's not like our English. Millions of people have made it their own. So some examples of words: paper tiger in English. Well, again, this is English. In my English, I'd say his bark is worse than his bite. Mute English. A student once used the term dumb English in their essay, and I picked them up. I said, you can't say dumb English. And that was my mistake. They meant dumb in the original sense of being mute. Mute English has its own word in Chinese, but it's used in English too by Chinese. You study English, a lot of grammar, but you can't speak it very well. It's called mute English. That has currency for millions of people. I don't mean in practice, I mean in terms of understanding it. Grammar. Chinese people, when they're using English spoken or written, perhaps written more so, tend to put the dependent clause first. Because he is ill, he couldn't come to school. Is that grammatical in standard British or American English? Of course it is. But the implication is Americans, British, more likely to say he couldn't come to school because he was ill. There is some cultural reasoning behind of that. Pronoun dropping, which is nothing new. English is not a pronoun drop language like Spanish, but we do it. Wish you were here, miss you a lot, love you, and so on. In terms of the emails, a lot of students, what they're doing is they use a certain form of deference. And I'm going to just be honest, my ignorance was quite outstanding. I felt sometimes the emails, the content, it was quite, I'm going to be blunt, obsequious at times the way it was written, but no, it's not. That's just reflecting at least 20, 21 years of Chinese cultural influence, Confucian influence, especially the relationship between teacher and student. It's very vertical. So I'm so sorry to disturb you. Please forgive my email. Dear professor, my dear professor. I mean, this is an example of China English. This is more of a pragmatic context because it's dealing with their relationship with you as the quote unquote higher ranking individual. So once features, grammatical, lexical, or both, become predictable, they're spoken by a wide number of speakers, however defined, across a certain area, however defined. At that point, we're talking about innovations, not errors. So we want to get the students' expectations and understanding of China English. These were the three research questions. Just doing this very quickly, we looked at 37 essays from this particular program, MA International Education. We then harnessed the features for student surveys with the Chinese students analyzing the features, then got their views via focus groups. So 37 essays, 25 students in the survey, 8 students for the focus group. Here are some of the results. Chinese students tend to routinely pluralize words which in native speaker English are non-count. So we get researchers, literature, staffs, feedbacks. I've seen that over the past decade. It's that which inspired the study. Besides, in and of itself, is English. I don't think it has a Chinese, American, Indian English flavor, but we've noticed a lot of Chinese students using besides as in a sentence initial position, as a sentence connector, whereas moreover, furthermore, might be more formal. That's a style issue. Overuse of the, which is very common in other Englishes, but is it, well, maybe if it is a feature of China English, we shouldn't say overuse, because that too is a loaded term, suggesting they're using it too much. Well, maybe not for China English. From a linguistic perspective, we might call this an example of hypercorrection, but the point is, we do see this. A lot of nominalizations, as we'll see here. Well, it's in the middle. Chinese economy system. Nominalizations in subject head position are very common in science writing. So for academic writing, that might be a good idea. Ultimately, though, looking at China English in academic essays is not the same as looking at China English when it's an email sent to a friend asking to meet for the night or a spoken conversation. But this predictability is what we're really focused on. The survey, again, just moving through this very briefly. I'm happy to share slides if you wish, although I know it's being recorded. Some weren't familiar with China English as a term. Well, actually, quite a few were, but that's only because it was coming off the heels of my class, which does mention China English. So, thinking Chinese switch to English, so it's very common. We think in our native language when we speak a foreign language or a second language. But if people do that collectively and it becomes an innovation, then it becomes an innovation. That's the bottom line. There is a huge difference between the linguistic and the societal reality. So they are expecting to write in standard British English. IELTS has a huge impact on this. We didn't really investigate how, but I suspect in IELTS teaching, well, I know they are teaching, and I agree they should, looking at academic writing as essentially very predictable, which in many ways it is, and using these phrases and so on. So maybe these phrases like besides in the subject head position, well, sentence initial position, or maybe using terms like researches is being reinforced in the IELTS training. I don't know. So English can be a major problem, or language anxiety, I should say. I don't think they have a problem with their English at all. I mean, they're here after all. Sometimes they do like to use China English, what they know to be China English vocabulary, like one country system. Uh, what is it called? The Spring Festival. So if you say to Chinese people, do you understand Spring Festival? I don't think a single Chinese person would say, no, I don't understand. What is that? That's China English. But if you say, do you understand slip carefully? One sign in Beijing might say slip carefully. 2 stores away, it might say slip and fall down carefully. And the subway station, maybe just a mile away, it might say watch your step. It's a lack of predictability that is the issue, not because slip carefully is not how it should be written. Well, there is no should. And they are recognizing the need for codification. If once a word's in the Oxford English Dictionary, we tend to trust it more, but we forget that before it's in the dictionary, it's already being used on the ground. I mean, there was an Australian English before they created the Australian English Dictionary, the Macquarie Dictionary. But obviously OED or Merriam-Webster in the States or Macquarie in Australia do carry weight, but so do online dictionaries, which show China English and Korean English vocabulary.
Alex,
Implications of
1
mark.
minute.
Okay, so that's the final slide. So good timing. Marking assessments, do we mark it as wrong? Do we say, no, it's absolutely fine, it's not expected for this context? Or do we say, no, it's absolutely fine as long as we understand? In terms of internationalization, my colleague Ray deals a lot with the mental health issues and the stress that comes with internationalization. And I think one last point to make, although I know a lot of what I've said has been more implicit about internationalization, but it's about we expect students to adjust to our academic culture. I think not entirely, but I think implicitly it's there. Why don't we also recognize theirs and adjust to it? I'm not saying that we, especially we here today, don't. I mean, that's why we're here, because we recognize there are issues. But I think it's important to understand how another student body is. No, they're not monolithic by any means, but they're going to have certain mindsets, certainly about the teacher-student relationship among Chinese students. That seems to be pretty much, from my experience, quite predictable. Again, not good or bad, just different. How that comes out their English is how culture is expressed. Okay, that's it for now. So I'll just stop.